Good morning, everyone. It is our Thursday morning podcast with the explicit measures with Tommy, Seth, and Mike. Hello, every morning. Good. Whoa. Hello, everyone.
Hello, every morning.
Hello, every morning. Hello, everyone, and good morning. Oh, yeah. It was a long night last night.
I just want to say thank you, Mike, for introducing that way, because my mind is like 2 days worth of sleep away from this conversation. So, like, if I start rambling, yeah, that's why, right?
Well, coming back from the speaking engagement,
right.
like I'm kind of a bit off anyways with the time shifts and stuff like that. So my body was adjusting to the other time frame. So now I'm all messed up and trying to figure out how to get back onto a normal schedule.
I think they said the time change, however long you were gone in a different time zone, the time, like, it takes half that time you were gone to like adjust back.
So I should be getting close to normal by Friday.
Sweet.
We'll see.
Should have recorded tomorrow.
Should have recorded tomorrow. Awesome. So quick announcements. So just real quickly, intros here. I believe the Power BI blog has come out with some new features for the September desktop update and service updates. I've been seeing on Twitter and LinkedIn, it seems like one of the most popular ones are the line chart series labels.
Yeah.
People seem to be very excited about this. And for those of you who don't know what these are, typically you would have a legend for your line chart, and each line is a color, and that's situated somewhere on the page. But now you can add a legend or a label essentially to the very last data point in the series of datas. So you can have the label of that information at the end of the chart, so you can see kind of which line means, this is my product type, right? And you have the different product types labeled at the end of the line chart. So it seems like a really cool feature. People seem to like that one a lot. And really enjoying that one.
The guy who created Deneb wrote like a huge thing on this too about how he's really into that.
Yes.
Yeah, it's one of those features that you're like, how has that not been available before? Because that's going to be, I think, widely used.
I think so. I mean, my only hesitation there is particularly the example that's given in the blog post. They've got 3 lines on a line chart. That's okay. There's going to be cases where you have just a couple lines, but at the end of the chart, the lines are very far spaced apart. There's a lot of gap between them. So things that I find, this is a great technique. I think this is a really good way of explaining, like, in my opinion here, this is one reason why you don't need a legend on the line chart, because you're now showing the line, you're showing what the end of it looks like. So I don't think you technically would need the actual legend at this point. However, when you get a lot more lines, and the lines end all at the same point, so you could get this kind of conflict of you run out of space if the 3 lines all match around the same data point, even though the lines have been very different throughout the whole time series or whatever. The end is we got how do you label that correctly then? So I think there's potentially some details that might have to be worked out there in the future, but I like the feature.
You can customize the color of the label name. So you can make it the same color, but it's not dynamic. So
even better.
Yeah.
Wait, it's not dynamic. You can't.
No, you have to actually manually call out the color, but that does help.
Yeah. This is getting very close to, for example, one thing we don't have today, which would be a very helpful feature in the future, Microsoft, if you're listening, would be to drive the colors based on like a column data point name,
map it together.
Like everywhere I have the product type of regular or the product type of deluxe, wherever that shows up, just define deluxe is this color and just derive it by data points, so that way, they're kind of doing that already with some of the visuals, but it's more based sometimes
on the order.
Yeah, exactly. So I think there's some.
Dude, I like that.
That would be, I think, another good feature that we would very much like. I don't know.
Ideas.powerbi.com.
Yeah, exactly.
It's about 23 months away now.
Exactly. The other one that came out, and we were talking about this one's in preview, just real briefly here, is Insights. Have you guys played with Insights at all?
Yes.
Not a ton, but as I was just kind of perusing again,
I
really want to test it out in specifically one of my kind of pain point areas right now, which is kind of monitoring reporting.
Oh yeah.
Because I think there might be a lot of value there as far as like, hey, this thing over here that you may not have noticed in the volume and numbers, like it went to 0.
Yeah.
Oh,
whoops.
That's not good.
That's a really good point. I just implemented another solution where we're starting to build the data lake stuff kind of from scratch. They don't know what's really going on, and they're like, "Well, how do you do logging?" And so I say, "Well, here, I'll write you a custom function." So we wrote a custom function that just gets called at the end of every table load, and it just lifts a date timestamp, the table that was loaded, and like the number of records that were written from that table. It just kind of just puts all of
Nice.
it together.
Yep.
So that way you have like a nice log of every time you call any table or any data. This is all in like in Databricks and Spark engine. So this is not Power BI related. But now we have a single table, to your point, Seth. Like it has a whole bunch of records by table in there, and you could produce a visual that just watches that and looks for anomalies. So like the anomaly detection, that's one of the things that I really like that they've produced recently. Was this anomaly detection is very helpful to see, hey, this is a spike. Let's go look at what's the spike, what caused it, and then it does a good job of trying to explain, like, here, this was mainly driven by X.
Right. So I will say for you guys, if you're sharing this with your organization or anyone listening, if you're going to like start saying, "Hey, there's this thing available," because it's one of those things that just gets released in Power BI,
Yep.
and you know everyone can access it, so to speak.
Yeah.
Let people know, like, "Hey, this is available." Share it with them, but say also it's in preview.
Yeah.
So some of the results are going to be not helpful
Right.
at all, because people
that's why it's monitoring reporting on the back
right.
end.
Yeah, right. But definitely let people know, like, we don't have any control of what the insights are right now. Like
Yeah.
so it's some of the stuff may be really helpful, which I've seen, and some are like, "Oh wow, count of year,
count of name is really high on this." Like, okay, we don't really typically count names.
It's like, yeah.
I feel like there needs to be a way of saying, like, or like as a data modeler, I feel like I would be one of the guys who would say, can I just tell the engine, tell the automatic, anomaly detection, whatever it is, here's a couple columns I don't want you to worry about. Don't consider these things in your analysis. Do whatever else you want
to show it.
Yeah, exactly. Do whatever else you want across the report, like sales and margin and other things that you're calculating. Probably makes sense to just figure it out, right? Go dig through all that data, but don't count my unique keys. That's not helpful.
Think my favorite insight I've ever seen, and this is back, they always had the insights, was day number of year correlates with day number of month. You're like, wow.
It's those kind of things that we kind of like, okay, I get it. Let's just skip that one and move on.
Yeah, like they should. Yeah. Oh, that's phenomenal.
So this is one question I don't know about this because I haven't played with it enough. Is there an upvote and downvote on those things?
No. There's a feedback, but there's not like the one where you're like right click analyze this. So
it'd be nice to have that just hang off a model, right? Like, Mike is not interested in that.
Yeah.
Like, don't bring forward that insight.
Well, and I think partly though, I mean,
Tommy thinks this is dumb.
I mean, there's some level. I mean, this is crowdsourcing in its entirety, right? If this is something that's happening behind the scenes, behind Microsoft's back end, right? I mean, how helpful would that be to have all these automated insights popping up, and then the entire world who's using Power BI is kind of giving some thumbs up or thumbs down if this was helpful or not. It lets the engine know, like, okay, things with date fields just aren't as relevant to me. I shouldn't be thinking about them. I should weight that lower than things around sales or other column names or whatever. Like there should be something there that we can feed back into the system for it to learn how to do it better.
And better yet, give like a Q&A, the Q&A builder that they have in desktop, where you can give more weight to certain fields.
Oh,
say this is
and then you can throw things towards us, which are like just bucketed threshold slider, right? Like, how much insight do you want, right? Like, do you only want like the measures, right? Do you only want us to compare this and a few fields or something? Yeah, you can.
Product type is weighted at 10, and day number of year is 0. So
well, hey, I'm a guy. I'm excited about like one of these things. It's not the full baked solution, but for the artsy fartsy in me, like the bookmark options, a whole slew of new things to play around with as far as how we can make those look on a report. So I'm pretty thrilled about that, because that means I can use that one object instead of a shape and something else, or just use shapes or an image or whatever. So I'm excited to see some of those new additional options on bookmarks.
Sweet.
Get to play with those.
Well, we had a fun intro. I mean, that's like a 10-minute intro right there. So for
It
those
is.
of you who are joining now, we're actually going to talk about the real topic now. That was
I love to right like 5 seconds before we go live. We go, do we have an intro?
yeah, exactly.
Maybe we should just talk about like the monthly blog, you know, in detail.
That should be like another thing all of it by itself.
Cheap content, man.
Cheap content. Well, it's funny because we were literally just saying before the phone call started, yeah, I don't think there was much going on before this release, and we're like, it wasn't that big a deal. And then we're like, here 10 minutes later, like, oh yeah, there's things we wanted to talk about.
If you're new to the podcast, this is why we started it, and main reason because we'd get on the phone and just keep going.
Yes, exactly.
So every once in a while, we'd come out with a good idea,
a good nugget.
You know what? What is that? That's a phrase. Every so often, a blind squirrel finds a nut.
Yeah, something like
Something like that. That's us. Just 3 blind squirrels trying to find that Power BI.
All right. So what are we talking about today?
Nugget. All right, moving on. How to resolve technical debt is our main topic here. So Tommy has done a great job just kind of doing a little bit of background. I thought it's always funny when we bring up these topics. We all come in with it kind of a slightly different angle. We think about it from different perspectives, which has been super fun. I learn a lot from everyone when we talk about this kind of stuff. So this is I think an interesting topic. I don't think many people talk about this, but technical debt is kind of like a result of whatever decisions you make, right? Throughout, as you build a report, whatever you're going to be producing, you have to make decisions to go one route versus another route. And this is one of the phrases I'll use or that I've heard before that makes sense. Given enough time and money, you could always build the perfect solution. But we just don't have unlimited time and or money to build anything that we wanted. So because of that, we have to make constrained decisions to pick one thing versus the other. And so you sometimes make compromises as you're building things. And this conversation is kind of around, okay, what is technical debt? What does that mean to us as Power BI developers? And Tuesday, we talked about how to clean up your data model. How do you remove elements from it? How do you know what's needed in the model and not? This is kind of not around that topic. We want to delineate this. This is going to be a bit broader, I think, beyond just talking about the data model, but a lot of other decisions that you're making, governance potentially, training. There's a lot of other areas I think that are affected by what decisions you make and how you roll things out. So, Tommy, you did a good job on the research. Is that a good summary? Is there stuff that I missed there that you'd add?
Yeah. So one of the common definition of technical debt, and we'll kind of start
Let's do
there
that because I like this one. This is a good definition.
So, and I'll read it exactly from the source, Wikipedia, but it's a really good starting point. So technical debt is a concept in software development that reflects the implied cost of additional rework caused by choosing an easy or limited solution now instead of using a better approach that would take longer. And my favorite part of this is, as with monetary debt, if technical debt is not repaid, it can accumulate interest.
Yes,
making it harder to do changes.
Yeah.
So that's the we'll say the official definition, and obviously that's from a software point of view.
Yeah. Let me give just a really quick practical example.
Yeah.
I haven't seen this one. This is kind of fictitious story, but like imagine that you've got one data model that you've been building, right? And there's the decision we need to get data into this data model, and we decide, you know what? We're just going to decide we're going to make an Excel sheet. We're just going to make a list of items. We're going to drop it in a table. That will be our source of information for this data model. And you start with that decision. Like that was the easy, fastest solution. Mm-hmm. We're up and running. We got the reports going. But now you have, let's fast forward a couple months later, people have copied the model. You have multiple reports looking at the same Excel file. And so now you've created this dependency on this one object that was kind of just easily thrown together, that you've now accrued interest on your technical debt, because before, where you could have just said, let's make a SQL table and just pull from that, or you guys are gonna laugh at me. Let's just make a SharePoint list and we'll pull for that.
I already had it in my head.
Yeah, you missed your calling, Mike.
I know.
I think there are SharePoint MVPs. Talk to John White.
Talk to Ted Patterson.
So you pick these. You could have picked another data source that would have been easier to maintain. There's less issue with it. It's not as unregulated. You have more control around it. So there are decisions that were made that now you have to, instead of going back and changing the one model, you now have to go back through and change the 6 models. And I would also argue some of this technical debt, you don't know you're making it until later on down the road. You're like, oh goodness, I should not have made that decision. We made it in a quick. It worked. It got us done. But like now we have to backtrack a little bit, and you have to rework that solution, that design, that issue, so that it can sustain like a larger data model. We have more data coming in than we expected. We got to fix it, and that's the technical debt that we're talking about. Thoughts. My words this morning. Seth, do you have thoughts on?
Like I said, as long as I keep talking after you, I'll
You
sound
you look like a little
I'll
golden.
sound coherent. I good, good points, man. You know, known versus unknown technical debt, right? You're always going to
Yeah.
have something that you're going to need to go clean up
Sure.
at some point in time. I think the focus for maybe today we talk about a little bit about both of them, but I think my mind was kind of on the known technical debts.
Yeah.
I love the correlation, you know, from Tommy, what you found online as far as like the debt of a bank, right? And if I look at how I would apply that, right? The to me, the larger the project, i.e., like the more time you're investing in a report, in a solution, is kind of indicative of the bigger load or the higher your interest rate could be in terms of technical debt, depending on what the choice of the business is, right? And ultimately, what we're kind of saying here is like technical debt is a byproduct of a business wanting things fast, because it from a technical perspective, if we're coming back with the solution and built in a time frame to make it the best thing that it can be, it's usually the pushback or a timeline that's saying go rework it, right? Like we need this out by x amount of time, and then you technically start cutting corners. Now, does that mean that you're cutting corners in the solution that it's going to fall apart? Like, no, you have to like weigh the pros and cons of, I want to do things in this way so I have double redundancy and all these things, that if something goes wrong, like I'm planning for the unknown kind of in an implementation, or I'm planning for scale versus just get it out to the first 100 users in terms of performance, and we'll go back and refactor, right? And I think it all of this conversation kind of revolves around like, you know, how much time you're investing in these big projects is going to directly relate to how much potential rework, right, you have in the future.
Yeah.
And I guess like the other comment I'll make right off the bat here is you don't get anything for free, right? And fast cycles don't equal bug-free perfect solutions, right?
True.
You're going to create future challenges no matter what. And you know, you keep alluding to the, you know, a triangle, right? You could almost think about that in terms of, you know, the cost of something, right? Speed and fully baked solutions. And depending on where you start weighing into those corners, you're gonna sacrifice something, right? And it's our jobs as technologists to work through the business requirements to ensure that we're not carving off too much out of something that is going to create a problem for the business. But at the same time, everybody's kind of hedging the bets a little bit as far as like how much can you get away with, because speed is typically the thing that a business wants first and foremost.
Here's a great quote. Someone's chatting on YouTube. Johnny Winters is making a comment here. This is hilarious. He says, my favorite quote around technical debt: sometimes it's like eating Oreos and brushing your teeth at the same time. I'm like, you get the nice minty flavor, but you also are eating an Oreo, and it's still got blackness all over your teeth. But and then Average Nerd Dad was talking about, you know, it's like that the triangle of cost, quality, and time. You're kind of picking where you are, and I think, there, to your point, Seth, I think there's never a case where you can get the solution 100% right out of the gate all the time. So I think you're always compromising on like how much technical debt can we take on, and then I think there's another part to this I think we're going to get to, is really around like the area of, once you have this technical debt, how do you start working it out of your process? So I think we've defined well enough what technical debt is, and maybe we could talk a little, technical debt could totally be, you've deployed a lot of reports, but you've never trained anyone on them. So no one's using your reports. So there's a technical debt area around your community or however your BI team is rolling these out, there's some technical debt with that because that's time you didn't plan for it. You have to be able to put that time. Yeah, yes, we can get these reports out quickly, but no one's going to use them because we didn't spend the time to appropriately do like a Friday training session,
Mhm.
announce the reports here, record a video for it. So those are some technical debt items that you just said. We just need the report to go live because we need to get stuff done. That's fine, but now people are struggling to use it because we didn't take out that technical debt, and that's
Yeah,
fine.
yeah.
It's choices.
And there's so many good things here. And as we thought of this topic, I was struggling with just thinking of technical debt as a messy model. I'm like, well, we talked about that already.
Yeah.
You know, like you build a model, you do the shortcuts. But as you think about this from the Power BI world, and what we deal with, because it's not just technical. There's so many aspects of a report.
Yep.
That I kind of outlined Power BI debt into a few different things that I thought ways that if you incur interest and if you don't do the right thing, it's going to be harder and harder to pay back.
Yeah.
And the obvious one is model debt, and we've talked about that in
Yep.
spades.
Agreed.
You know, doing things in Power Query or implicit measures or a lot of different loopholes to get the right number. The other one was cultural debt, and we've talked about data culture, but I think this is another one where if you just keep doing the same process over and people expect the same thing, you're churning and burning, so to speak, with your reports. You
Yep.
accept all the requests, and the people who are building reports have their own process. The longer you wait to, in a sense, pay that back, so there's a right way to do it,
Yes.
the harder that is going to be to change. The other one I thought of was visual debt, and I think this is one of those. To me, as I thought about this, like, oh wow, this is probably the most underrated one.
Interesting.
We spend so much time on the model, but a lot of times like we're putting the visuals
Oh.
together, and it's like, you
Yeah.
know, the titles and maybe the layout and the colors to
Yep.
get those just right. Like, well, we have a line chart like we talked about just before with the labels with the new line series. You know, maybe those colors are just not right. How much time have you spent on the theme?
Yep.
Those little things that the more you build, the harder it gets back
Yep.
to, you know, pay it back. And that includes bookmarks too, man. And we get into that.
So,
And the last one.
I want to jump.
Yeah.
I want to jump in there. Your two comments because you did I mean, I 100% agree with you, and that's why Seth and I built like this whole like scrims and layouts side of things because you're right, Tommy. I've even heard other MVPs say we're really good at the data modeling. That's what makes our minds tick. We love that part of it, but there's part of this art slash. I mean, it's a kind of a. I feel like because this tool's new or newer to our business area people, I'm used to building stuff in Excel. I'm not used to thinking through like all the intricacies of how these different charts interact together.
Right.
I'm not used to thinking about how the color and aesthetics work. Megan Longoria is very much on like making it accessible. So picking colors that are having enough contrast so I can read what's on the page correctly. It may look good to me, but it may not look good to everyone. So you have to be more mindful of your audience and how that stuff is working there. So yeah, those are great points. Sorry, Tommy. Number 3.
Yeah. The last one, and I think kind of meshes everything together, is really just business logic debt. I'm sure there's a better name for that, but this is the idea around.
Yep.
We're creating measures, and sometimes we do where it's like I just need a certain name for this measure, or we have a hierarchy that we build ad hoc. But the more you build these one-off things in a report, especially with hierarchies that I've seen,
yeah,
where all of a sudden now, like, how do you actually get that hierarchy? Is that used in other reports? Do they match together in other reports? Like, let's say you had content and, you know, or books, ebooks versus print books, let's say as an example. And one report shows certain products that are ebooks, and the other one for the same one shows products because you didn't have a system around building the right hierarchy and logic. And then, so just that process of going through your terminology and what's actually displayed. So that's kind of where I saw where you can incur interest and outside of just thinking from a technical code.
Yeah.
I read a comment in here that I almost lost it in my mind today. Is Charlie Mather, typed in tech debt versus life expectancy of model or report, which is a great point.
Yeah.
Which is a great point. But in my head, like I read it as tech debt versus life expectancy. And I'm like, I'm out.
I'm out. All right.
But it brought it.
That's a good point.
That humorous thought brought forward kind of the idea that we've talked about before, which is you can avoid a lot of tech debt or the unknown tech debt if you're thinking about building for the future, or what we always talk about, which is build for others, right?
Yeah.
Are you building your report or your model or things because it's, you're going to manage it, you're going to be the one that's always doing it?
Mhm.
Well, would you build it differently if you knew you had to transition it to somebody or bring somebody else in and teach them how to do it? And the answer to that is almost all the time, yes, of course, right? Like if you
Yeah.
know somebody else is going to see your dirty laundry, right?
Yeah.
Like you're going to clean it up and make it good. So it's also the reason why, as Mike, you're still consulting, but like as you walk into a new space or somebody else's report, more often than not,
Yeah.
you look at it and you go, are you kidding me? Why would you build it this way?
Yeah.
Right, because many times everybody's guilty of it. You're building things in your own way that you understand, but is
Yeah.
it really the way everybody would understand it, or is it in the right way?
Yes.
And when you build things in that regard, I think you do reduce a lot of that unknown tech debt.
Yeah.
I want to play one thing too, just as we're talking about debt. Obviously, we think of it as something we need to pay back, but one of the things that in that definition they say is, as with monetary debt, like similar to monetary debt, technical debt is not necessarily a bad thing,
No.
which I kind of love. And that started
Yep.
making me think about, like, we all have a home budget. If you have a house, you have, or, you're paying back your house.
Yep.
You have that fixed cost, which is okay, so to speak.
Yes.
But it's the idea of like, and sometimes we have to build the visuals just to get an idea of what we're trying to do.
Agreed.
But it's that ability to say, don't pay what you can't afford, so to speak. But yeah,
I really like that comment around the tech debt versus life expectancy of a model. If you expect a model to not live very long or a report to be quick hit and then out, I mean, you can take a little bit more risk and take on a bit more quick tech debt and do things a little bit more loose and not as restricted. And you can kind of let the model just, know that it's not going to live very long. I would say though, with that comment, right? If you expect a report to have a short lifetime expectancy, or you're not expect it to be used very much, plan for its obsolescence. That's part, like, you're also doing yourself a disservice if you just throw it out there and you just expect that report to live on forever, even though it's not going to be used. But like, that's why Microsoft pauses data sets or refreshes of data sets that are not being
Yeah,
used.
so you don't have things infinitely just sitting out there running and refreshing.
It makes total sense. So like,
Totally.
if you look, like, and this is where Tommy will finish his blog on the Scanner API at some point here in the future.
so close. I'm so close.
Hey, I'll just, I do owe Tommy a dinner because I lost a bet, but I will say this: if you go look at Power BI tips this morning,
No,
there's a blog out, a really nice blog that came out for mobile devices. So
actually,
Who wrote? Hey, Mike, who wrote that blog?
oh, that would be Mike Carlo, who
Hey.
yeah, has written the blog. And in addition to
kudos
that,
to you.
and in addition to that, there's also a scrim that came out with it to show and illustrate the colors on the
Look at that.
page. Yeah, well, so if you
Look
want to
at
go
that.
check those out, it's on the homepage of Power BI Tips. So, Tommy, balls in your court, buddy.
You said Monday. You said you were going to post it Monday.
Hey,
He fooled you.
hey,
I got me.
I gave you some
All right.
time to catch up. Where were we again?
Yeah, right. I'm gonna lock this in, right? Because the idea, how do we resolve technical debt, right? And let me fly through what I think are the key points.
Yeah, let's do that.
Regardless of if it's a report or a model or a larger project, right? I think it's important to, first and foremost, Mike, and you nailed this right in pre-conversation as I was typing it, right? Communicate to the business. Like, transparency is something that just needs to be happening very well between technical teams and the business anyway.
Agreed.
But certainly if you have to make a decision from one route or the other, that's a conversation point, right?
Yeah.
The clear risk and ramifications of choices around this have to be upfront decisions. And to your point, Mike, before this, like, sometimes those are not always bad.
No.
Sometimes speed is paramount, and the business says, yep, we totally get it.
Yep.
We're going to build this thing and we know we're going to rebuild it.
Correct.
Or we know the next iteration carries that heavy lift, right? So in order to do that, though, one of the things like I would highly recommend is you need to create those work items that you're bypassing. Like, what are the things you're skipping so that as you're building a model, a report, a process, a solution, right? You're in the guts of building that. And that's when you need to start laying out all of the choices or paths you would take differently if you were working for scale, or if you were working for, whatever other certain thing, like perfection of, something looking exactly the way somebody wants it. And then kind of as you progress throughout the process and this project, you have this backlog of work items that you've stored up,
Yep.
and you need to tie them, I think, to the future plans, right?
Yes.
So the next time you iterate over something,
Mm-hmm.
or the next time you get into the projects, you need to like remind business that there was a percentage of time that you had allotted to these tasks that are now tied to why you're not going to do it in, a week anymore.
Yep.
It's going to be a week and a half, or it's going to be 2, or you're adding to that project because you have to pay back the interest on that loan,
Yep.
i.e.
Yeah.
whatever. And either that's like, sometimes it's a brand new solution, and other times it's iterating and going back to those things that you skipped, because eventually those are important to the business, right? It's just prioritization of getting a solution out the door
Yes.
now versus how do you support it long term.
There's a couple chat things that are coming through in the chat window that are very much related to this topic. So someone, I believe Johnny Winter was saying, do you have like a register, a technical debt register where you log these ideas? And I think to your point, Seth, I think he asked the question right at the same time you're making the right point. It's really around just put a process in place of your team, right? It's not just the leader or the manager of the BI team to write down what technical debt is. I think it's across the team. You have to say, we know we're going to be making decisions that we'll have to come back and fix things, but we need the entire team to write down what they feel like is something that we need to come back and fix. Oh, I had to quickly make this calculated column because I didn't have time to get whatever, right? So write that down as like, here's a technical debt item, put it in a place where you can prioritize all those technical debt items. And then, you actually have to groom them. Like, I mean, I'm a big proponent of the sprint and agile processing because it provides value quickly, but then you actually have the ability to say you can groom back some of these technical debt items. And I know not every company can do this, but typically in the sprinting process, if you're doing proper sprint and agiling, you should be doing like 4 weeks of development, and there should be 1 week of dedicated, we're not going to produce anything this sprint. We're going to just spend an entire sprint cleaning up technical debt, changing code, fixing things that we need to fix. And that should be your list of, here's the groomed backlogged items of things that we thought were technical debt. Someone goes through and reviews them and says, these are the most important ones. And then we tackle those larger technical debt items, because when you can remove that debt from your plate, you now have the ability to kind of freely move forward and keep going without having to have to do, again, you don't want to incur that debt long term. It just gets harder and harder to unwind.
This is I'm gonna make one statement here. I've never worked in an organization where they would just say, hey, yeah, you're free to have your week. I have seen it where it's been the plan.
Yep.
But business is typically always like, well, that's a free week. This is the higher priority. That now it takes that in. This is the one area where I'm okay with not being 100% transparent in terms of
Yep.
the business should. There are upfront agreements that typically organizations have, which is, I'm gonna allot somebody's time in percentages.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
The business rarely wants to give up on tech debt, which is why I build that into swim lanes of like, okay, we want this thing. The tech debt is just part of that.
Yep.
Like
part of that build.
Right.
Part of that estimate, and or like it's easier to cover those things, I think, on a weekly basis, as opposed to like saying like you have an entire week where a team is working on tech debt. Like it's also some of those items I think that the team can, if there's not like, if you burn through all your work for the week, there's always a body of work. It like everybody's got the whiteboard. It's just that's the whiteboard for the team where they can go in, and this is always stuff that needs to get done.
So 2 things I love. I absolutely love what you just said that I'm already thinking about is one, like documenting what your technical debt is, and work with your boss or your team or, kind of whoever sees, in a sense, the technical side, and prioritize, because you can't pay everything off, and you can't accomplish or, completely be debt free, but you can at least prioritize and try to work with the business to say, okay, here's all the things that, we really want to improve from the debt side. What's the most important? And then try to tackle the list that way. The other side you said about the reoccurring, Do you have processes in place, just like you probably have, again, to take the bank side or the budget side? All of us probably have reoccurring payments or things where, like every third of the month we pay our the credit card. That's where the interest can become almost too hard, and where, because I want to get in that too, where interest becomes almost unmanageable. But are you paying back your, at least some debt on a recurring basis, or do you have a way to kind of manage that? You'll never be 100%, but do you have some standards in place where it's not always at the end going, oh no, like we're too deep, like I spent too much at the casino? Like, do you have, in a sense, your weekly or monthly payments, so to speak, that you always pay?
Yeah.
One of the things from the actual model side, we'll compare like models that are refreshed in our service compared to the what's being used, and we'll show like a monthly, like we'll kind of combine it and put a monthly report together for the internal team to say, hey, here's all the reports that are being refreshed, here's their refresh schedule, this is being refreshed 15 times.
Yep.
The data set size is 2 gigs and it's had 5 views. Does this need to be there? Is there something we can do with that?
Ooh,
So
interesting. Yeah.
things like that. And then like with
That'll
training,
be in the
yeah.
blog, right?
Not this one, no, but my other 3 that I'm working on. But like that recurring payment, because what happens, and I think this is probably things that I would love to hear your guys' opinion on. When does debt become almost unmanageable? Where does it get to the point where it's almost too hard to, in a sense, pay back, where you're like, does chapter 11 sound good?
Yeah.
So to speak.
So it's interesting. I'm reading another. I was Googling here on the side here about, what does technical debt and how does this work with a Scrum team? How does this plan? And so there's some other recommendations around this, and this is even in the chat window, right? Donald is saying, I think it's easier to add 20% of your time in a sprint, and say about 20% of your time should kind of be around just dealing with technical debt as you go, right? And this article that I'm reading right here is talking about, like, at the end of the day, whatever you're doing, whatever you're building, quality has to be paramount. And so if the quality will start suffering, we have to start addressing some of these technical debt items to make sure that we continually keep the quality at that high level. So I think this article is like really doing a good job of, like, Tommy, you mentioned like tracking things. So how this is something, this could be a talk all by itself, is what kind of KPIs or measures or things that you have can you wrap around what is going on with the technical debt? Like, just because we've, again, Tommy, to your point, right? We're refreshing this data model. We know there's some technical debt in it. We think that technical debt is acquiring every day or every month we go on. We're adding more data to the data model, and it's causing the data model to increase in size by N, X, Y, whatever. You can put metrics around some of these things that you're now quantifying the size of the technical debt. And I think that helps with the communication back up to leadership and say, we've hit a threshold where the technical debt is high enough that we need to fix this. Another quick example of this one would be, let's think about data quality, data that's coming through and how clean it is into your system. You could make 100% clean data all the time, but I liken it like an exponential curve, right? You'll never get there. It'll never be 100% clean. And if you want to do that, it's going to be very expensive for you to make sure the data is always clean 100%. And again, there's probably areas in industries that really need clean data, like financials. You're not going to let a lot of data, you're not going to let a bunch of missing data lay around when you're talking about people's financial monies. But there are places where, like, okay, we've got 56 million, values in our table, our dimension table. Like, it doesn't really matter if we're only off by like 0.001%. Like, okay, we're clean enough. Like, we can move on. We don't need to fix that last little bit. Go on to the next thing, kind of thing.
Yeah, I want to take you said KPIs around technical debt. I'm going to kind of expand on that. And I think one of the most common debts that occur that we don't realize until it's too late is that we'll call that your adoption debt or your business logic debt, where you are creating your metrics, your KPIs, your visuals, and multiple reports, because you never had a process, have different names for them. Or it's one of those where you're like, oh, you just want to see it by this particular region and this particular product category. Sure. So we'll show it in this report, but there's not a lot of training on, should that be its own new business measure, or a business KPI. So now what happens is you have 10 reports that have the same idea of sales,
Yep.
but it's unclear what each one is portraying or displaying. And what happens is people get confused, angry, and overwhelmed because they're like, why is that number this for USA and this one's this? And then they ask you and you go, you have no way to backtrack. And now, to me, the interest there is people's experience in Power BI, or their trust. And I think that's a debt where that incurs interest, where trust the more time, and again, that's usually one of those things that it's harder to track compared to like how large, what's getting refreshed. But over time, because you might not have the pulse of each team or the company on their quality, like how do they experience their data. But then it gets to a point where people will find other avenues. So to me, that's
I agree with all that, and it brings forth an idea, right? That always shocks me. Why the vast majority of businesses are okay with the lack of documentation, which is technically a tech debt, right?
Agreed.
It's a knowledge
absolutely.
It's a knowledge debt. And it kills companies more so than anything like we do in technical, right? Like you take a technical resource that owns a part of the business without documentation and they go somewhere else. I guarantee everybody listening has had that happen where somebody's like, great, now we have to, okay, let's do a knowledge transfer because now we need to understand what that person was doing because you have no redundancy and there's no documentation that you built along the way. That is one that has always
we got a whole bunch of reports in my workspace and they left. Where are the reports now? Those are the ones the C-level was looking at. What do we do?
Right.
Those kind of things. Yeah. But I mean, I've been in positions where they're like, yep, we're always going to have someone, shadowing you, making sure that they know what you're doing. So that way, if you move on or if they move, like, it's kind of like the win the lottery kind of thing. But I have very rarely seen companies, being able to allocate appropriate time to make sure that people are appropriately knowledge sharing across team members. And I think this is a good story though for the Center of Excellence, right? I think this is a good story for why you want one of those things because
and why it needs to be part of that adoption for them, right?
Exactly. When I was running the call center, like I moved on at some point to a different position after running that for a number of years, and all the information I had learned, all the knowledge about how to answer these questions, were all living in a single location. So instead, again, this is one of these things is like when people ask you questions to do something, I tried to reduce technical debt by answering the questions in like a forum space. And that way anyone could come back and reference those questions and answers and know the information beyond when I leave or move on to another position. I feel like it's the same thing with the Center of Excellence. There needs to be a place where every question can come to, like, you get questions in email, on chat, in Teams. You take those questions, you bundle them up, you stick them in a common area, answer the question in the forum, send the link back to the person. I think that's a really easy thing you can do right now is just stand up a place, Jira, Confluence, SharePoint pages, whatever you want to do, put it somewhere and at least start pointing people to where those answers are going to live. I think those are all really good.
I love some of the comments today in the YouTube chat.
People are punchy today, man.
Hey, they're all there. What is it? Thursday? Oh, okay, great. Like,
exactly.
We're all
yeah, right.
Yeah. Who is
So Tenacious Data just said nothing says mediocrity like Center of Excellence, which unfortunately is very true. So
you got to be careful about that. How things are implemented. Yep.
True statement.
Or incentives. We've talked about incentives a lot with that too.
What do you mean by incentives for that? I'm curious.
Well, the reason why would Tenacious Data say that the Center of Excellence is like nothing says mediocrity like the Center of Excellence? It's because no one's done it successfully, or like it's not on everyone's priority list.
I agree.
So it doesn't get the resources it needs.
Agreed.
Therefore, it's usually just kind of there, but it's not business changing.
I mean, Microsoft is a very big proponent of promoting the Rockwell way of doing things. I mean, they've got like a weekly meeting on Fridays. It's planned. I mean, Tommy, you do it too. There's like a dedicated time where you show up and you. So, I think it really depends on like this is I think where the executive sponsor comes in here to a bit, where they help push if that's important to the organization, and we know we need to transfer knowledge between people and build this solution. It comes from leadership. We've got to carve out time. We've got to make it interesting and fun for people to get engaged. And when, again, I'll go back to like how I've built a couple of these things. It's all about removing people's pain points. You remove people's pain points, they will be more than happy to participate. If you give them data and more data than they've ever had before because they're participating in these center of excellences, you're making their life easier.
I read this as the center of excellence is not a new concept for the Power BI adoption roadmap.
Yeah.
True.
The implementation of these in organizations, I think, have become pretty large blockers for agile development, which is why I think the thought around implementation is very important, and why I think some of the great concepts in that adoption roadmap lead to good implementations of this, as opposed to like, oh yeah, that's known as the giant gate, or like I can't get things done in my org.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
Yes.
We've talked a lot about the bad part of debt. I do want to ask you guys, what is healthy debt, so to speak, or when is debt in all these aspects, model, adoption, visual, when is the debt in a sense justified?
That's a good question.
I think it comes down to what's known, right? You can always plan on unknown things, like things you don't know and you have to adapt to in the future. But I think it's the good stuff is what's clearly communicated in the business, and the business understands that this implementation is going this route, and there is a payment that needs to be made in the future. I think that is what I would quantify as good tech debt. When you start making decisions that are negatively going to impact the business because of one part of the triangle, and typically it's speed, that's where I think bad tech debt comes in. Like, regardless of what the business decision choice is, from a technical perspective, if you're not pumping the brakes a bit, or still screaming red alarm, and they still move on, right? That's a poor business decision.
Yeah,
I think that's bad debt.
Oh, here's a good one. This is so Kevin just dropped this one in there. I think this is actually a really good point. We've said this a lot of times. If it doesn't save you time or money, it doesn't pay off. So some technical debt is good when you can work through that technical debt, and the payoff for that technical debt is not larger than the time or effort it costs to implement it. So there's, it's like that. It's that payoff ratio, right? Yeah. We can either just build an amazing design, but it's to my point about data cleaning, right? You could spend all the money in the world and have all the cleanest data you want in the world. It's just going to take forever and a lot of money to make that happen all the time. So there comes a point in time where it's like the extra money and or time that I'm spending against cleaning these things isn't worth it. And I've actually, I've worked this out with other projects where we build like quality metrics. Like, this column has data quality, and here's the score of that data quality of that column. You just track it. We know there's going to be technical debt. It's fine. We identify an owner of that data part or that data element, track the number over time. Okay, when the data quality of this column falls below 80%, it's time to clean. And so now we can say, okay, now it's time to evaluate. We're going to start having problems because the data quality of this column is off far enough that we need to spend the effort to do it. It's that cost balance curve.
So yeah, I'll take a very practical approach to this and say, if you can justify it as an investment up front, then I think it would be justified. So we're saying like this will pay off in the long run. As long as we pay it, it's going to, it might not provide or save money now, so to speak, or, but it's going to in the future, where you can at least say there's a long-term plan. I'll give like a practical example is your report build, working with the stakeholder. Working on, we've talked about this before, but having like that sandbox phase of trying to visualize for the user, like here's concepts of what we can do. So you are throwing visuals on, the titles may not be right, the colors might not be right, the names are all wrong, but you're just trying to, at least explore with them and do the feedback where you're going to say there's a longer term process here.
I like that. That's a really good example.
Yeah. And then from the adoption or knowledge debt, that would probably be the investment, is how much time, like building up or spending the time to build the center of excellence, but also a plan for people to get there. Because again, you can do those power hours, and you can have a center, like a knowledge center, but most people are not going to be passionate. Like, oh, there's the data team just put together a bunch of documentation. I got to read it right now.
Yeah.
They're not going to care there till it's too late.
Yep.
So it's putting the time in the beginning in terms of,
I agree with that.
So giving the incentives, but that's where I would say, like, if you can justify the investment,
yes,
the long-term investment, then that debt could be justified.
And I think you make a really good point there around, especially one of those items. People don't want to come in and read long documentations. I don't want to either. I don't like reading a lot of the documentation from Microsoft because it's just a lot of words and it's just a lot there. So a lot of times I have a very specific problem I'm trying to solve, and I'm trying to find the answer to that specific problem. And your Center of Excellence, I think, yes, it does help out, but I think there's also this area of like a lot of people are going to show up with a very simple question and they need a very simple, elegant answer on how to get to that solution solved, right? So building, I mean, when you're working with people in that Center of Excellence, you have to think of like very small doses of information, quick hits, quick solutions. Here's a couple of articles. Here's a couple of thoughts on incremental refresh. Here's how to set it up. Go over here. Here's how to make it fixed. Here's when you have this kind of error, this is what's happening. So just kind of like nuggets or little short nuggets that you can then easily consume, and then it adds value to people long term. I like that. That's really good.
Yeah. So
I honestly, Tommy, I really struggled with like what is good technical debt, but I think your descriptions of those two items were actually pretty really very, very relevant and interesting.
So, and I will say all this too, and I think, Seth, you really outlined this for me. That is probably the biggest thing is any debt that you incur, whether it's justified or not, some of them are going to be fixed costs. Like it's not because you did a shortcut. It's just the way of the business, the limited resources. I think you have to start and tracking it and say like, what, like, just like, again, like if you do a home budget where it's like, what are things that we have to pay for? How much are we paying for that, so to speak? If you could, in a sense, kind of prioritize that.
Sure.
And when there is more, like, what are our recurring debt? What are things that we'll be incurring? And then just like if you, even the report bill, like how much debt can you put a tracking on that? So you have it somewhere so it doesn't build up. We go, oh, wait, what happened?
Yeah.
So I love that. Like it's like, and
have a budget, man, right?
Have a budget.
Like you can't indiscriminately use your credit card or multiple credit cards and not expect the bank coming for you at some point. Right. Like same thing, right? Yeah. Like if you start using that card a lot, you better keep track, and you're going to have monthly payments that you need to make on it, right? As a business,
we all have to pay utilities. We all have to pay for the house, but are we tracking that? And again, it's like, and then, I love that idea of the budget, and you have to start there. You have to start on like basically writing down what all that debt is in order for you to be able to resolve any of it. Because 100%. I love that.
Agreed. Totally dig it. Well, we've again burned through another hour of time. I think this is
incredible.
A good ending here on this one. So our only ask, thank you for everyone for listening. We appreciate your participation. The comments today were absolutely hilarious. Nice job, guys. It made me chuckle. A lot of good feedback there. So thank you very much. Our only ask as doing the podcast is, if you enjoyed this, if you have a lot of fun listening to us, if you argue with us while you're doing a walk around the podcast, get a couple laughs, great. We really appreciate it. That's why we do this. Please just share this blog post with one other person this week. Please share this podcast with one other person this week and just say, hey, this is something I found that was fun. It was interesting. If you're talking with other Power BI people, share it with them and let them know, hey, this was an interesting topic. We really enjoyed it. Maybe you'll enjoy it too. Tommy, if you're listening or watching, where can you find us?
So first, go read Mike's blog today and then read my blog next week when it comes out. So kudos again. So if you're listening to the podcast right now on your favorite podcast platform, leave a review or a rating for us. And then if you want to watch it live, you can every Tuesday and Thursday, 7:30 a.m. Central on YouTube and LinkedIn. If you're watching us live, subscribe to us on Apple and Spotify so you can have our episodes. We are on 42, which is crazy. And like I said, if you're on social media, spread the word. We love the community here, and we love to get more people involved.
Awesome. Thank you all very much, and we'll see you next week.